So the launch of Season 3 of Arena Breakout Infinite also brought its launch on Steam, meaning it brought in a ton of new players that are going to be starting into a game that's already been being played for a year or years by a bunch of other players who now have a ridiculous amount of resources that they may have to be going up against, meaning for some of these newer players, it's going to be a bit harder to progress and get into a lot of resources and try to build up their stash. And I think one of the most important parts of building up that money and starting to get into difficulties where you can make a lot of coin is really your start of jumping into lockdown mode. One of the biggest issues with lockdown mode right now, though, is you'll find a lot of people running full tier 5 armor. So finding a really good budget build that still has really good stats so you can use it with higher tier ammo to face those higher geared players is going to be very important for jumping into that next step of the game. So in this video, I want to go over another incredibly strong weapon that is going to be right around 200,000 coin for the full build, the decent sight, silence with a 60 round mag that's overall going to be a very good gun for that more mid-tier budget range. And this is going to be the AK-102. Now the AK-102 is pretty unique in that it's an AK, but it's 5.56. So this is going to be a 5.56 caliber weapon, has 600 RPM, which is a little bit lower than you would like to be able to easily win head-to-head fights. But this definitely makes up for it with the much higher accuracy of 5.56 rounds. And the stats you're getting with this for the price, while also having things like being silenced and a 60 round, are also very good. So this is going to be an all-around very good weapon. You just may not win as much of those just head-to-head straight on fights if they're using a weapon that has, say, a much higher fire rate. But this full build we're currently looking at with this hollow scope that's going to be a bit more of an expensive red dot, this weapon's going to be right around 200,000. It is later at night, so depending on the site you use and depending on what times you play, it'll be probably 200, maybe a little over 200,000, but you can definitely get it more at 200,000 if you play at normal times. And again, really depending on the scope, and again, really depending on the sight you want to use. If you want to use like a longer range sight, they're going to be much more expensive. Sights are actually really expensive in Season 3 for some reason. But starting off, we have our pistol grip. We're using the AK series tactical rear grip. Then we have the stock. We're using the AK-100 series universal tube with the carbine industrial stock, but don't put the butt pad on this stock. The butt pad for the stock is like double the price of the stock itself, and it only gives a little bit more recoil control, which you really don't need. This build's already pretty good on that. Then we're going up, we're using the AK compatible rail inline dust cover, which is where our sight is going to be on. And again, you can use whatever sight you want to use. If you really want to go cheap, use a compact sight bottom rail with a compact reflex sight on that. It's basically a super cheap red dot sight that's going to be like the cheapest thing you could possibly get for a sight that you can actually see through. So that's going to be incredibly cheap, but if you want to use a longer range, maybe a variable zoom scope, those are going to be a lot more expensive this season, but they generally are worth it as well. Then we're going to have the AK series premium charging handle. This is just going to give a little bit more ergo. Then we're going to have the AKM standard gas tube. It really doesn't matter which gas tube you're putting on this. Then we're going to have the AK series CAA polymer front handguard. And on this, we're going to have our front grip, our vertical front grip, just really one of the best priced performance grips you can get. Then for a tactical device, you can just use whatever you want. If you want a laser, you can just use a blue laser. It's incredibly cheap. If you want a flashlight, you can use that. Or if you want one of the more expensive lasers, you can. Just going to add a little bit more onto the price of this weapon. And that's really just personal preference anyway. Then for the suppressor, we're using the DT threaded muzzle adapter with the 45.6 multi-caliber suppressor. That's going to be the entirety of the build. And then finally, we have our magazine. Now the 60 round magazines for this are some of the cheaper 60 rounders. And I would generally recommend using a 60 rounder when you're going into lockdown. You're going to be facing higher tier players. You want that 160 rounder. Generally what I recommend doing, 160 rounder, 130 rounder, keep the 60 rounder on the gun as much as you can and just keep loading directly into the gun with the ammo in your storage container. And then if you really need to in a fight, you reload to the 30, but you want to keep the 60 rounder loaded. That's generally just going to be better for fights. If you want to stick with 30s, you can go like 330 rounders. The 30 rounders for this are like 8 to 9K. So you're generally looking at a similar price anyway. I would just recommend getting a 60 and a 30. And then we have our ammo. And again, this is going to be 5.56. So you're not going to be using any white ammo. The first thing you can possibly use is M855, which is around 900 right now. You can get this more in the 700 to 800 range if you're playing at a normal time. time. And this is going to be tier 3 penning. This is actually a pretty good tier 3 penning round. Has 50 base damage, has 922 initial bullet velocity. 5.56 is very accurate, even though there's some heavy damage fall off. And this round doesn't really hit your stats, but has 34 pen, 13 armor damage, a pretty good tier 3 penning round, but pretty expensive. If you're playing in normal times, you could definitely get it a lot cheaper than it is right now. Then we have 5.5A1, which is generally what I'd recommend. It's 1900 right now. You can get it 18 to 1900 usually. And this is a pretty good tier 4 penning round. 47 base damage, really high initial muzzle velocity, so it's very accurate. It doesn't hit your stats very much. 40 pen, 20 armor damage. I would say one of the better rounds if you can get it 18 to 1900 around. One of the better tier 4 penning rounds. Even at 2100, it's actually not that badly priced for this caliber of round, and you can very easily still fight players with tier 5 ammo, especially since this weapon is so accurate. At longer or medium ranges, it's accurate. It has really good stats in general. So this weapon with 5.5A1, you're definitely going to be able to be facing tier 5 players. And once you get the hang of it and you can just start winning fights against tier 5 players, you're taking their gear and you're going to be making a lot of coin very quickly. I wouldn't recommend using M995 with this build. You generally want to save that for much more expensive, more build weapons. But that's the entirety of this mid-tier budget build for the AK-102. This is one of my favorite builds to jump into lockdown with if I'm say just running like tier 4 armor or something like that. This is, I think, one of the best weapons you can do it with. It's just all around a good weapon. It's easy to control with the stats of this build. You can put whatever sight you want on it because it's 5.56, so it's super accurate. You can get cheap 60 rounders. You can get pretty good ammo for not super expensive prices when compared to other caliber rounds. And all in all, it just has everything you want in a more mid-tier budget weapon. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.